Welcome to the latest edition of CharitEpulse. My name is Catherine Rastongi. I head the charities practice at Shakespeare Martineau, and I'm joined today by my regular co-hosts, James Saunders, Audit Partner at Moore Kingston Smith, and Charles Mosquita, Investment Director at Quilter Cheviot. We had thought that this week was possibly a slightly quieter week for news, but I think you'll find that we will still find things to talk about that have irritated or interested or just who knows what has quite been affecting us this week. But we will start with the government announcing that they are launching a local covenant fund of £11.6 million, which is designed to strengthen partnerships between charities and local authorities. So we have talked about the covenant previously, and a number of commentators had said this is not going to happen on its own unless there is some funding put behind it. And then seemingly out of the blue, this £11.6 million fund has been announced, which will operate in 15 local areas, and it's there to implement new local covenant partnership agreements. All a bit of a mouthful. James, if I come to you first, did you have any thoughts? Is 11.6 enough? Do we think this is the right thing?
It's a start, isn't it? I think that's, and as you say, Catherine, it's aimed at 15 high deprivation areas, poor social capital areas. So what they call double disadvantaged. And they're looking for someone to run the scheme. It's a start. It's 11.6 million. It's a bit of cash starting off. It's interesting that it's the relationship between charities and councils in particular, I think, because certainly, I work with a number of clients that are charities that work particularly in the care sector and the social welfare sector. And a lot of them are struggling with councils because the councils are struggling for money themselves, and changing a lot of terms and conditions of payments and those sort of things. So at a time when the councils are struggling for money, I suppose this is quite a good target to have.
Definitely. Charles, any thoughts?
Sorry, I'm going to go bar humbug. 11.6 million sounds a lot of money. I think they're going to be spending it over 3 years. I don't know what they're going to achieve. Sorry, to me, the problem isn't the relationship between charities, or maybe a problem between relationships and local authorities. The problem is money. The government squeezes local authorities squeeze charities. Something we've said time and time again on this thing. They need to change the way that they're funding charitable organisations, particularly when they're delivering things that are part of the welfare state, and give them some assurity of that funding going forward. And until that changes, I just don't know what this is going to achieve. Sorry.
Interesting. We shall see then. And it's quite depressing read, isn't it? You can be of these 15 local areas that are double disadvantage, which is high deprivation and poor social capital. I think, oh, let's just rain on their parade even more by labelling them as such. But it'll be interesting. I think there was some headlines around those saying it's very positive and this will bridge the gap. But I do take your point, Charles. I think when the squeezes are put on, it's immediately passed to charities. They're not going to be immune from that.
We had this, didn't we? And with Stephen Bubb and actually it was Stuart Etherington, wasn't it? With Tony Blair and Gordon Brown giving quite a lot of money to NCVO, to organising a whole lot of things. And I reflect back and I think what was actually achieved with that money.
Yeah.
Catherine, on the Charles's point about the funding for councils and to charities, it's worth saying that part of the covenant rollout last month, I think it was reported that the Cabinet Office and the government have introduced a feedback process which allows charities to feedback and to report instances where they think they're being treated unfairly, or I think the phrase was something like inconsistent with the principles of the covenant or something like that. So it's quite generic but there is that. Now, what happens from that, of course, is yet to be seen. But there does seem to be at least an acceptance and appreciation that this is one of the big problems that the charities have been telling government, that relationship is just not right at the moment.
But there's an issue, isn't there, around there's a concordiat within government around procurement that's not meant to disadvantage small and medium-sized companies, but by definition it does.
Mm.
You know, they judge it on price and financial security of the organization. So if you're a small organization that, you know, that doesn't have particularly strong finances, you might be better at delivering, but they ain't going to give you the contract. I mean, the whole thing is just so, unfortunately, they've put too much sort of bureaucracy into it because they're terrified of fraud, instead of allowing locals to make local decisions of the best people placed to do it, and then to back it over a reasonable period of time.
Indeed. Okay, moving on. Next, we've got the Fundraising Regulator, who has published their annual report about the complaints that it receives. And I always find this quite useful because they do kind of themes that they're seeing, and they give various statistics about what they're addressing and what concerns are crossing their desks. But this particular article was focusing on CICs, so community interest companies, which are the majority of complaints that the CIC regulator is seeing, or in terms of the increase of complaints that the fundraising regulator is seeing. So they were saying it is 18% in the latest report, whereas in the previous year, 12% was about CICs. And I think we had seen this probably around this time last year, where the complaint was about CICs not being clear about their legal status, perhaps implying that they are a charity when they are not, people giving to a CIC thinking that that means they'll get gift aid, and all sorts of other issues that were related to that. I think what we did slightly disagree with was one article we'd seen. The headline was "Call for Stronger Regulation as CIC Fundraising Complaints Rise." I don't actually think there was any reference to the need to stronger regulate CICs, which already have their own regulator. But I did think it was interesting to see these kind of examples of the complexity of different legal structures, legal entities, and how that's working from a fundraising element. So in the interest of fairness, Charles, I come to you first this time.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, 387 complaints out of 166 odd thousand charities and 31 or 37,000 community interest companies. You do think that that's a relatively small number. I was more. So to me, actually, I think that tells me that there aren't a huge number of complaints going. So the headline was definitely misleading, and it appears to be a lot of it is around door to door and putting bags through letterboxes where people have asked not to. So I think the fundraising regulation has actually done a really good job in the sector, and I think it should be applauded. I think we need to be very careful about headlines talking about stronger regulation. I think the regulation is proportionate, and I think it has been shown to be effective. And you know, I take my hat off to Gerald Oppenheim and his team for doing it. The only issue I have with it is that it's voluntary, which it isn't voluntary, and it shouldn't be voluntary. But I've raised that with Gerald, and I have to say I will not make much progress on that front, I suspect.
James, are you being hounded by charity bags being put through your door?
No, I'm not, and it does seem a little bit small fry in the grand scheme of things. The only thing I would say is that it does seem that it says, I think, that's a significant proportion of the complaints related to two particular CICs. So that's probably the point I would take, is that it's concentrated. It's probably not widespread, but if someone's doing something wrong, they're probably doing something wrong quite often, and they'll get a bad rep, you know. And I think there's probably a line that has been crossed with these two organisations where they've just gone over the top. Hence, they have got a high proportion themselves of these complaints to the regulator. I couldn't get too excited apart from that.
Okay, ready for excitement now, though. This story definitely got me excited and my team in terms of looking at this headline. So, this story relates to the Charity Commission using its own powers to merge two disputing charities to run premises as one organisation. So ordinarily, charities that are merging, they would have to exercise those powers themselves. And yes, there would be liaison and registration with the Charity Commission, but it wouldn't be the Charity Commission actually doing it. Whereas here, the Commission has announced, and it relates to the Muslim Community Centre Mosque 1977 and the Dudley Central Mosque and Muslim Community Centre, both of which were subject to statutory inquiries, which is never a good look. And the headline here was, "It is extremely rare for the Commission to use this power, which is only used in the most complex of cases." I even thought extremely rare is putting it mildly. I could never think of a similar example where the Commission has done anything like this. And I suppose my query is about the consistency of when the Charity Commission has powers that it can exercise. How does it decide when to do that? And when does it leave sometimes charities struggling to address complex issues themselves and trying to operate within the law and deal with things? Whereas if the Charity Commission could step in, why does it only do that sometimes and not others? And I also just wondered generally about whether people are feeling some of their interactions with the Charity Commission are not consistent, depending on who they are dealing with or when the query is being raised and those sorts of issues. So, James, you're back in number one. Did you have an adverse reaction to this article?
It just struck me as a very odd instance, as you said, Catherine. Don't see this very often. What I just got the feeling that the Charity Commission had run out of patience with dealing with this particular case. It claims to have years and years of regulatory concerns. As you said, Catherine, at the beginning, there are lots of compliance failures as well, both subject to inquiries by the Charity Commission. So there seem to be other, bigger questions around actually what these charities were, failing to identify trustees, all sorts of very, very basic issues and questions that couldn't be answered. So, it looked interesting. I mean, obviously, you're the expert in this sort of area on the legalities of things. It looked very interesting and particularly interesting to the lawyers, I would have thought.
Yeah, definitely. Charles, any thoughts from you?
Yes, I wouldn't have used the word rare. I would have said that the Commission was going to be reluctant to use this sort of powers, and rightly so, actually, because one, I suspect it's incredibly time consuming for the Commission, and it also opens them up. We've seen, haven't we, where trustees have been banned, that they have been challenged on that. And part of me thinks that actually there are certain areas where the Commission shouldn't be challenged or shouldn't be allowed to be challenged, so they should be allowed to get on with it and do the job. And I suspect that the fact that, as you said, you've never come across this before, this is something that they will have done, as James has pointed out, as a very much so last resort.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually. And possibly the combination of the statutory inquiries being open as well at the same time, just a kind of perfect storm, maybe. But I think reluctant is a better description than saying it's rare, which does also lead on to a story about recruitment at the Charity Commission. So the Commission intends to recruit 80 staff to meet extraordinary increases in demand. So this has been announced by the Chief Executive, David Holdsworth, and has said that that is a direct reflection, really, of the increase in demand that the Charity Commission is seeing and that they're trying to keep up with that demand. Personally, I was hopping mad. I thought the recruitment had happened and people were starting in January, and I had been telling clients that the delays would get better very soon and they just needed to be even more patient than they had been. Charles, I'll come to you first. I think you are usually quite sympathetic to the Commission about the challenges they have with their budget.
Yeah, so the bit that I picked up was actually people complaining to the Commission about charities, and I would quite like to know a little bit more about that. I mean, I'm going something with the Commission at the moment, and they are being desperately slow. and I'm finding them a little bit binary in their responses, which is somewhat frustrating. Where I think actually if I could have picked up a telephone call, had a conversation, we would have actually cleared things up a lot quicker. So I'm hoping that that the chief executive is also changing working practices and possibly empowering people more within the commission. I know that's not as easy. It's easier to say than it is necessarily to do. But I know the other thing that the commission has been given quite a reasonable sum of money is to develop AI within the commission, which again I think will help them from a productivity basis and response basis. So, yeah, I mean, I have sympathy for them on a lot of cases. I think fundamentally they do a very good job. But and also, sorry, one other thing, we must remember that their budget 20 years ago or 15 years ago was effectively twice what it is today in real terms. So they have been subject to cuts after cuts after cuts after cuts. And I suspect this has got to a breaking point, which is why David Holsworth has applied for more funding and been given it.
Yeah. So he's announced, hasn't he, a 27% increase to the Commission's budget in 2026-27. James, did you see this article? Any comments from you?
Yeah, I a bit like you, I was a bit confused about quite what the timing was. But yeah, it's interesting when they say how many people they have, and not much to add really. I don't think to what Charles has said.
Yeah, I did like one of the comments in the article was that charity is not expected to be fluffy. So, well, okay, I'm glad you've told us that. But yeah, so, and also talking about that the Commission won't come down hard on trustees. I thought, well, except maybe sometimes you should and you do. And, you know, we are seeing trustees disqualified. So it's a balancing act, isn't it? I think for the Commission. But I just hope that the backlog of current applications for various permissions, consents, registrations, and everything in between can be cleared, because at the moment it's definitely not working well.
I think that was a good thing actually in the article, which was unfortunately down right at the bottom, was them actually saying that charities aren't there to court public opinion. They're there to actually deliver on their purpose. And if that's unpopular, then we, the regulator, are going to be sympathetic to that rather than following on the wind, which is quite a change from certainly a previous, chair of the commission.
James, this is going to be your specialist subject, but I see that the number of charities filing late accounts has leapt up by 51% from 23-24 to 24-25, which is quite the increase, isn't it? So it was 11,778 that had filed late to June 2023, and then 1 year later, that's gone from 11,000 odd to 17,773. And bearing in mind that charities have got 10 months from the financial year end, and as a specialist charities auditor, James, were you giving them the benefit of the doubt why they might be late, or is this something that trustees should be prioritising more to get those accounts in on time?
It's an odd one, really. I mean, it's a huge increase, and an awful lot of charities filing late, 17, nearly 18,000. When we know from Charles what the entire population of the charities is, and it's, percentage-wise, it's a large percent, missing the deadlines, and indeed, I think presumably some of those are missing deadlines year after year. So I was surprised that number was so high, in its own right, and then to see the big increase, there is a suggestion that it might be because of financial pressures, it might be because of holding back accounts because of bad news. I'd be interested. We don't know at the moment. We don't know anything more than the numbers themselves, the statistics. So I'll be interested to see and find out more about why this is happening. There is a link with for any charities that are companies. There is, of course, a separate companies house filing deadline, which is 9 months, which is a month less than the Charity Commission deadline of 10 months. So there's a slight awkwardness there. But there is also there has been an allowance by Companies House recently to extend filing deadlines at Companies House. Perhaps charities that our companies are extending them at Companies House and forgetting to do them at Charity Commission, or not realising the Charity Commission doesn't move with them. Perhaps it's a lot of turnover of staff or trustee. I can't see an obvious reason why it's gone up so much in 1 year, to such a high number in the first place.
Yeah, it is staggering numbers.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Charles, what are your thoughts? Is this something you would see
Well, yeah, so I mean, 11% is a high number for people being late. I mean, I was expecting the trend to be going the other way and getting better, because I know the Commission has been working on this quite hard, and there is much more visibility these days because it's up on the website. You go onto the Commission and you can see it, and also the ramifications for charities. I think they shouldn't forget that they're dealing with any financial institutions, or anybody who's going to be looking at money laundering and everything else. They're going to go onto the website and they're going to see it. And if you've got persistent late filings, and particularly ones that are long, they're going to be questioning the governance of the organisation and its ability to manage its affairs. So, opening up a bank account could become more problematic. So I agree with you. I think 10 months is certainly sufficient. I mean, the one question I'd ask James is that if you did need to extend with the Commission, I get with the Companies House, it's easy. Is that easy, or is that, or does the Commission not really?
No, the Companies House extension is done through a portal.
Yeah.
The Charity Commission one, there's no scope for it at all, other than emailing them and asking them if you are a trustee, they might be interested. It's a bit inconsistent, but yeah, it's not. There's no matching up or tying up with the Companies House, for example.
Yeah.
interesting?
It is. I work in with the academies sector, and academies, the DfE have been very strict with academies on filing deadlines and submission deadlines to the DfE for academies accounts. The success rate is amazingly low in that particular arena. I know it's a subsector. I know it's a smaller, much more smaller pool, but the number of academies that don't submit to the DfE is tiny, and so that's why I'm quite amazed. It does suggest that the stricter application of these deadlines, it should be the way to go, really.
The other question I would ask is how much pressure has come on because of, I know within the accountancy profession there was a shortage of people able to do this. Has that been part of this?
It could have been. Yeah, I mean, that was a difficult time in the accountancy profession where there was a lot of churn and there was people were understaffed in general. So that might have been part of it, but it doesn't explain the whole. It might be one of a number of factors. Yes. And
the other thing is, it doesn't say as if they're 1 day late or 30 days. What's the average? What's the breakdown?
It doesn't, and it also doesn't focus on whether they're smaller or larger or size of. I mean, these might be absolutely tiny ones, or the ones that are closing, or there might be any number. Like I said, number of factors in there, but it doesn't disguise the fact a huge jump in 1 year is worth investigating. I would have thought in some detail.
Well, the article does say the Charity Commission has been contacted for comment, so maybe we'll see something more on this, possibly. Good. Well, that brings to a close this episode of Charity Pulse. Thank you very much for joining us. Please do like and follow, comment, tell your friends, neighbours, relatives, anybody you pass on the street to have a listen, see what you think. We'd love to hear your comments and any suggestions for future topics or things that we might consider, and hope that you can join us on another session. Thank you very much.